Welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We're in week 2 of a 3-part series covering the 2 little books in the Old Testament, Haggai and Zechariah.
And we hit all of Haggai last week, which sounds like a monumental event, but it was 2 chapters.
Pretty small book, right?
But it was still cool. And then we started on Zechariah, and we went through the whole story last week. I'll try to really pare it down this time, but it's really the story of Israel.
Yeah.
And it's after the kings, where God time after time said, you got to get right with me, and there was this downward spiral, then things got worse, and finally we saw last week King Nebuchadnezzar came in, wiped out everybody. They were taken into
Babylon.
Babylon.
Right.
And there was, quote, no more Israel.
Right.
So we had the land that stayed completely decimated, and then we had some people, a remnant, in Babylon. Through a series of events, they were allowed to come back. So after they came back, this is where we see Haggai starting and Zechariah. And last week we saw the altar had been rebuilt, the foundation for the temple had been rebuilt, and then everything stalled. And after about 15 years of that, Haggai was responsible to firing everybody up and getting everybody excited, and got the temple rebuilt.
So just to place this historically, we're in the year 520 BC. And Haggai and Zechariah are contemporaries. They're both in Israel at the same time. Haggai maybe a little bit older. He's working more with the government officials. Zechariah seems to be working more at the popular level. And their messages are vastly different, right? Haggai is focused on, you've got to get this project underway.
This is God's house. We got to get it started. We can't afford not to.
Zechariah is really more about repentance and bringing the people back to God. And the way God did it was completely different too. Right? Haggai, here's the message. Thus saith the Lord. Zechariah, I'm going to give you a series of visions, and it's going to be really weird, and it's going to be like, and then we're going to do some more like what we consider prophecy. So we covered 5 of those visions last week, and I think we gave good counsel to everybody that think of it as the story of Israel. And so you saw where, horses came, and that kind of represented, getting annihilated. And then there was a series of things. So now they're back, and they're back in Jerusalem, and everything is perfect. And then we find out it's not. It's
perfect.
Really not.
And that's where we start this week. So a lot like last week, there's no way we're going to be able to get into these 3 visions, and then I think there's 3 or 4 more chapters that we're going to be reading this week too.
We're actually doing a chapter per day, which seems like a lot. But we're talking like...
they're not 30... they're 15,
somewhere
16.
between 10 and 20 verses a day. Right. It's really not a lot, but it seems to be changing so quickly. So, we won't be able to cover every detail. But So there's 3 visions left?
So there's 3 visions. The first one talks about a flying scroll that we find out is a curse. So... we need to place this in time. How do we do that, or what do we do with this?
Well, so if we're looking at these visions sort of like a panorama, Israel has been oppressed, and now they're back, and God's calling them to repent, and He's got the high priesthood set back up again, and so the scroll has this curse on it that's basically a judgment if you break the law. So they're back in the land, and it's like, but they're not really obeying the law yet. And God says, I've given you a grace period as we're getting stuff set up, but things need to start happening again. And I will be punishing you again if you keep breaking the law, if you don't obey.
Now, I know we still do this the same time, but it's always amazing to me when I read about other people
How do they not
who disobey God, are severely punished, are then restored, and continue to disobey God. But that's exactly what's happening.
And so he calls out a couple of specific sins that they're doing. But that's what it's like. We're getting back to the way things are supposed to be. And so that's what the scroll is about.
So then we get into a weird one, right? A lady is put into a basket in its simplest form.
Yeah.
And it's there's a unit of measure in there. What, an epith?
Yeah, and ephah. Ephah, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, which is really a bushel.
Yeah.
So what's going on with our bushel, and why are we putting a woman in a bushel?
It's a bushel basket, and the woman represents evil
and wickedness. I think.
Yeah. And it's taken. It flies. It's a bushel basket with a woman in it flying. It's like, okay. Yeah, almost have to wonder if Zechariah woke up in a cold sweat, right? Yeah. He's like, what is going on here? Basically, God is promising. This is pushing off into the future now. We know from Daniel and from Revelation and such that the nation of Babylon is going to be somewhat reinvented in the end times. And so what this is that this woman represents wickedness. It's being taken out of Israel, and it's going to be sort of consolidated in this new reinvented Babylon. So they're not done with it yet. They will have to face it again. But this is really pushing off until the end times. Yeah.
Right. And then the eighth vision is about chariots. And it doesn't sound so bad to start with, but there's 4 chariots, all with strong horses, and then there's specific colors on them. And if you take it back to the first vision, it seems similar. So we got to take it as destruction again, don't we?
Yeah, except the colors don't exactly match the first vision, and they do match the horsemen of Revelation, but what they do is not the same. So it's really, to try to make a direct connection is a little bit weird. It seems like they're angelic messengers that are, it makes me think of Job almost. You know, I'm going off and the sons of God came to report what they're doing on earth. That's sort of what I see here in chapter 6. For instance, the black horse goes to the north and says, I've made peace in the north. Well, you look at the black horse in Revelation, and it's famine and it's plagues and everything. It's not exactly the same thing. So something is there is angelic work going on in the world, and I think that probably is continuing in like our modern day leading up till the end times.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's hard to place it exactly, but I think that's probably big picture.
Right. And then at the end of chapter 6, we see God asking Zechariah to take these 3 or 4 people and make a crown.
Yep.
And then they place the crown on the high priest's head.
Yep.
So do we know who that high priest is?
Well, that would be Joshua still, from earlier in the book.
Okay, so now we're back to this is an event that
in
is
Zechariah's
happening in time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Because it's choose some people from the exiles. That's people who are alive during there in Zechariah's time.
Right.
Now, what's interesting is that crown is not. I mean, it's put on Joshua's head, but that doesn't make him king or anything.
Yeah.
Because what they do then is they take that away from him and they go ahead and place it as a memorial. So it's looking forward. There is a priest king coming that they're looking forward to. Gee, I wonder who that could be.
Right. So it is their present day, but also looking forward to the Messiah.
Sort of like a foreshadowing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So then, we got a break now because that finishes off the stuff that's happening in 520, sort of. Okay. Mm-hmm. Because by the time we get to chapter 9, it's all a later, it could be possibly decades later. Right? And so chapters 7 and 8, we're done with the visions, but we're not really in the second half of the book yet. So there's a few things that happen, and it's almost like your margin. It's like the stuff that doesn't have a home. It's not with the first half, it's not with the second half, but it's some things that need to be taken care of before we can move on.
Yeah. So one of them is there's a question that comes from the people of Bethel, and they basically say, "Hey, we're back. Do we still have to fast? Because when we were gone, we had to fast, and now we're not gone anymore, so do we still have to fast?"
Right.
Which seems like a really legitimate question.
Well, because they were fasting and mourning over the loss of the temple while they were in exile.
Yeah.
They've rebuilt the temple. So do we have to do that anymore? And God's response is,
It's hilarious.
Yeah, he's like, you weren't even doing it with the right motives anyway, so why would I care what you do, in a sense?
Yeah. It was a big ouch.
It's like, it doesn't really matter what you're doing if you're not doing it with the right heart. So
Yeah.
maybe you should start doing some things with the right heart.
Yeah, and again, it hurts me, just the application to ourselves internally. What are we doing that we're just doing as rote and not with the right heart?
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. That's the easy application, which hurts sometimes.
Yep.
And God gave some simple commands on what they need to do. Exercise judgment, show brotherly affection, don't plot against fellow citizens.
Yeah.
I mean, which meant they were already doing.
That's what they were doing. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's exactly what
like,
they were doing.
So then in chapter 8, God says he's going to live in Jerusalem, and that Jerusalem will be a truthful city.
Yeah.
Which meaning it's not today.
Right.
And then he gives an example. Old men and old women will even be walking around, kind of an implication that they couldn't do that today. So maybe there was too much theft going on, or the streets were dangerous at night still.
Yeah. And when you say today, we're talking about Zechariah's time, not our modern time.
Well,
but yeah, maybe today too. But in Zechariah's time, there was some muggings and there was some stuff, and people would say, kids come inside and whatever.
Yeah. So you said that it's kind of hard to place this. Is this another one of those where he is talking about their present day? So 520 BC, and then also pieces looking forward to the future.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the stuff in chapter 8 has not been fulfilled yet. It's never been like that. You go to Jerusalem today, you got the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, is walking around, military. Everybody's got a rifle on their back, and it's not. I mean, yes, there are definitely safe places. People go to Jerusalem all the time, but read chapter 8 and try to apply it today. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it's definitely looking forward to when God says, "I will be there." That's the Messiah. That's the millennium, and then into the new heavens and the new earth.
Yeah, so then God tells the nation of Jerusalem to rebuild his temple. So I'm assuming they're talking again in Zechariah's time.
Yeah.
Rebuild the temple, which is really Haggai's message, but it's also showing up here.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let your hands be strong, and then he gives some new rules. Speak the truth, don't plan evil.
Right.
These are good. And then also what I really liked is the fasts will become joyful.
Yeah.
Right? So the fasts aren't intended to be, oh, woe is me, I'm fasting, but a joyful occasion.
Well, and because what they were doing is at certain times of the year, they were mourning the loss of Jerusalem and the loss of the temple and the loss of the what. And so they would fast for that. And God's saying, yeah, that's fine. We can keep those fasts, but now it's going to be because of the rebuilding of the temple and the rebuilding of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And the
So it seems like he
Messiah's
answered their questions, or he finally answered their question after 2 chapters.
Exactly.
And the answer is, yeah, we're keeping them, but man, it's better totally
so
change.
Yeah.
And then we actually, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that gives us the break then. We're no longer, when we transition from chapter 8 into chapter 9, we're no longer in 520 BC. We don't know exactly when, but the language changes, the point changes, the prophecy, everything changes at this point. So what you read from in chapters 9 through 14 is going to be very different than what we've read in chapters 1 through 8.
Right, so now we see the coming of the King.
That's
the Messiah. And there's rejoicing and words that I think we see elsewhere, coming in on a donkey and coming in humble and
chapters 9 through 14 really are the final restoration of Israel, which is still future for us today. That's still I love 9 and 10. Chapter 9 verse 9, most people are going to recognize this. Rejoice, daughter of Zion, daughter of Jerusalem, your king is coming to you. True and victorious, humble and riding on a donkey. And of course, Jesus fulfilled that when he came into Jerusalem at the beginning of Passion Week. But then verse 10 seems like it keeps going. But it's, I will remove the chariot from Ephraim. I will remove the war horse from Jerusalem. The battle bow will be removed. He will announce peace to the nations. His dominion will be from sea to sea, from the Euphrates River to the ends of the earth. Yeah, that didn't happen when Jesus came in on the donkey.
Right. So like you were saying, that part is the future.
Yeah. So we have part of this is fulfilled, and part of it is still looking forward to the final restoration of Israel, which we're going to see over the next several chapters.
Yeah. So that really finishes our reading for the week.
Yep.
Next week, how many chapters do we have?
Well, we got 5 chapters left for next week, and we'll finish up Zechariah then with some huge promises, some really neat stuff coming up in the next 5 chapters. But some really good stuff. If you haven't read Zechariah for a while, I hope you're interested. I hope it's being interesting to you. We mentioned last week that not too long ago, at least from this recording, we taught through Zechariah here at Oak Tree, and you can find that series of messages on our website or on our YouTube channel, oaktreechurch.com/messages, and you can just search for Zechariah and find that whole series there. Next week, we'll finish up the book. Until then, hope you have a good week. Hope that you share this with people and share with us what you're learning and what interests you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.